welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Rebecca Roberts from the Library Events Office, and thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation of Black Literary Heroes. I hope by now you all have seen the announcement of the lineup for this year's National Book Festival. If you would like to find out more about the festival, if you are interested in volunteering for the festival, please stop at our information desk on your way out of the library, and there'll be plenty of information for you there. Do take a second to silence your cell phones just now. We are recording this event, and boy, would it be embarrassing if your friends were watching it on YouTube and it was your ringtone that rang out. Plus, you will want to concentrate on our speakers this evening. Joining us are A'Lelia Bundles. She's a producer and a historian. Her new book, Joy Goddess, A'Lelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance, is a biography of her great-grandmother. Glory Edom, founder of the reading network Well Read Black Girl, is here. Her new book is called Gather Me, a memoir in praise of the books that raised me. And joining them in conversation is Marita Golden. She's an author and creative writing coach, and her book, New Black Woman, as well as the other two books, are for sale in the back of the room and will be after the program as well. So welcome, ladies, to the Library of Congress, and thank you all for being here.
Hello. Well, I'm really glad to be here tonight with two ladies that I really admire. And Alelia's been celebrating her wonderful new book. And every time she asked me to be on a program, I was in Dallas or I was in Austin. So I'm glad that we were finally able to pull this together. And I think that what we want to do is to frame the conversation, ask Glory to read the first page and a half of her book. And I really love the book because I'm one of these people that if I'm in the midst of an emotional crisis, I go to the bookstore instead of the doctor. And you're like that too. And then A'Lelia will, of course, set the historical framework for her marvelous book, which is kind of a bookend to On Her Own Ground. So let's start.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to the Library of Congress, and I'm so excited to celebrate your book. Joy Goddess is such a beautiful accomplishment. So my book, Gather Me, a memoir in praise of the books that saved me, is really about my love of reading and how it really buoyed me in times of stress, when I needed a light, and I'm gonna begin from my prologue of the book. At the lowest points in my life, the most isolated and difficult times, when I was sad, when I was confused or frozen or drifting or desperate, I reached for a book. When I was joyful, successful, well-nourished, and content, I reached for a book. When the people I depended on disappeared or turned their backs, when I was handed what felt like too much to bear, when I was trying to do right by those I loved, when I was desperately trying to block out the raised voices in the room next to mine, or waiting for an answer that never came, when I needed a word to break the silence that surrounded me, I reached for a book. And when I moved to Brooklyn, ready to start my life fresh, to shake off some hard years and finally figure out who I really was, I reached for a book. Books have been my ladder, my stepping stones, my therapist, my teacher, my medicine, my parents, my religion, my lover, my fool, my instructional manual for life. Words, sentences, pages, chapters have echoed my loneliness, reflected my joy, guided me to the shadowy corners of my heart and soul that needed to be coaxed into the light, given me strength, helped me grow and change. Books taught me to bloom. Books gave me my direction, my career, my community, my chosen family, my purpose. Thank you.
So I just have been reading Glory's book for the last few days, and I'm really glad to be in conversation with you because so much of the joy that you get and the sustenance and fortification that you get from the books that you read, it's a similar story and similar arc for me as I've been learning about the women in my family. So I'm going to do a really quick slideshow. I'm going to speed through, but I know that people know who Madam Walker is. I don't really have to explain her, but there would be no A'Lelia Walker without her mother, Madam C.J. Walker. And up till now, I think she is mostly known as the only child of Madam Walker, but I'm hoping that Joy Goddess A'Lelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance will let her shine her own light. Hi, Lynn. I did not see you. It's nice. This is the beauty of this, of having a new book, is that you get to see friends who turn up and you're not expecting them. So thank you. This is Madam Walker. Madam Walker was well known for her wonderful hair grower, the hair care product that she created because she was going bald. And she employed thousands of women, trained them all over the United States, Central America, and the Caribbean, became a millionaire, but most importantly for me, helped other women become economically independent. And here she is in 1917 at her first convention of her sales agents at what had to have been one of the first national conventions of women entrepreneurs. And A'Lelia Walker had to live up to this legend, this icon that her mother was. And you know, it's very hard to do that, but she was involved in the early days of the business. And you see them here, they had started out very poor. Madam Walker was a washerwoman until she was 38. A'Lelia Walker was orphaned when she was an infant or when she was a toddler. And so they had struggled together. But now you can see in 1912 in Indianapolis, they're with their chauffeur. So there's a big arc, a big American dream. A'Lelia Walker persuades her mother that they need to have a presence in Harlem. And while Madam Walker's business is headquartered in Indianapolis, in 1910, A'Lelia Walker is running the Pittsburgh office of the Walker Beauty Company and the Lelia College of Beauty Culture, named after her. She tells her mother they need to be in Harlem as Harlem is becoming the mecca of black business and culture. And so you see the two of them here. They have really prospered at this point. They buy a townhouse, a single townhouse, and then a few years later, the townhouse next door, they hire Vertner Tandy, the first licensed black architect in New York, who redesigns this facade. And downstairs is the beauty salon, in the basement is the Walker Beauty School, and upstairs are their living quarters. This is the beauty salon. The beauty school, A'Lelia Walker is right in the front to the left. And A'Lelia Walker, in trying to live up to the ideas and the path that her mother has created for her, is involved in political and cultural and civic affairs. She's kind of been painted as a caricature. If you read any Harlem Renaissance histories, you know, she's just kind of a dilettante, but she's so not that. And so that's what this new book is about. But among the things she does during World War I is to volunteer for the Circle for Negro War Relief. And this is kind of the beginning of what I see as her role as a social impresario, where she hosts events and curates events with live music. She knows all the musicians and writers and artists. So in this role with the Red Cross and the Circle of Negro War Relief, she hosts events for black soldiers with James Reese Europe, a famous musician of the time, James Weldon Johnson, J. Rosamond Johnson, who we know as composers of the Negro National Anthem, among other things. And then she rents out the Manhattan Casino for this ambulance, the benefit to raise money for the ambulance. And they actually raise the money. Part of the reason they are able to raise this money is that she invites Enrico Caruso, the famous opera tenor, to be the cameo celebrity. And so he comes, and that helps them raise the money. And then she invites him to Villa Lawaro, the home that her mother is now building in Irvington, New York, because that townhouse was not big enough for two women when Madam Walker moved to New York. So Enrico Caruso names the house Villa Lewaro using letters from her name, Lewaro. And this is the invitation for the first party. They have A'Lelia Walker's very involved in creating the ambiance for the party, the music room. I'm just going to speed through so that we can get to our conversation. Madam Walker dies in 1919. A'Lelia Walker becomes president of the company. This is the 1924 Convention of Walker Sales Agents, and A'Lelia Walker becomes an icon of the Harlem Renaissance. Now that her mother is gone, she wants to do philanthropy in her own way and becomes a patron of the arts. She converts a floor of this townhouse into the Dark Tower, the iconic gathering place. This is the first invitation to the Dark Tower in October 1927. The Dark Tower menu, which includes A'Lelia Walker iced tea, and it's Prohibition, so you can guess maybe what they might have put in there. This is the bookshelf that was designed by a famous Austrian furniture designer, and some of the books that were in my house when I was growing up that had been in this bookshelf: Jean Toomer's Cane, Countee Cullen's Color, Langston Hughes's The Weary Blues. A'Lelia Walker died in 1931 in August, and thousands of people lined up to attend her funeral. So I just wanted to give you a picture of her. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me.
Always. I mean, just seeing those pictures, you know, there's something about those sepia tone pictures that is so resonating and so moving and very powerful. Of course, you know, and actually we're going to be a conversation, a three-way conversation, so let's make it that. I wanted to look up the idea of a hero, you know, in the dictionary, because that's sort of our starting point. And before I go into asking you more questions about both your books, I wanted to talk about heroes for a bit. A hero is a person admired, idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. But as I was reading your book, Glory, it really resonated with me because you write so lovingly about the ways in which your father inspired your imagination, accepted your voice, encouraged your voice. And in my newest book, How to Become a Black Writer, I begin with my father telling me bedtime stories about Cleopatra and Toussaint Louverture, and he was a hero. And I was thinking how incredible it is that we took these ordinary black men and wrote about them and made them heroes and made them immortal. And so let's talk about, you know, the heroes, the ordinary heroes and the literary heroes that, you know, that inspired us, and why writing itself, I think, is an act of heroism.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up my father, because my dad was such a huge figure in my life and made me feel like anything was possible. He was always encouraging me, always telling me silly stories, but like he had this bravado about him that made it feel like anything that I said was possible. And I carried that with me for such a long time, especially when I would experience hardship or just feel challenged. And even when he was no longer in my life physically, like I still, like even this book, all the books I've written, I feel like my dad has had a hand in them. You know, I lost my dad in August of 2018, and that was it was such a challenging year, but it was also the same year that I signed my book deal. And I really felt that like he made that possible for me. And when you have like one person, whether it's a caregiver or a parent or just someone who loves you so unconditionally, it makes telling your story easier because you know that like you can be your truest self in it. And then in terms of literary heroes, I feel really tickled just to be on the stage with you. And I've shared this with you before. Your book, I read your book, Migrations of the Heart, when I was in college, and it gave me permission to write. Like the way you write is so moving, and it feels tactile, and just like, there's a rawness to it. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, listen, and you write about some things that just are just, it felt like you were pouring your heart open to us. And I felt like I felt like I knew you before I knew you. And so to be like that young woman in my dorm room and now sitting on stage with you, it still feels very surreal. Like I'm just like, what? How is this even possible? Like in what world?
Well, you know, it feels surreal also because in your work with the Well-Read Black Girl, you're carrying on the literary activism tradition, which the Hurston Wright Foundation represents, and we're going to talk about that, you know, later on. Yeah,
it's like
so
everything
is
in your shoes.
You're my daughter, you know. So, but the question of, you know, why is writing heroic?
I think telling the story is the heroic part, because without our ancestors, without that honesty that happens, something is missing. You know, like you don't know what it is until you hear someone else say it, and then you recognize yourself in the story. And that's like what gives you the courage to say, like, okay, I can do it too. It's like a witnessing. It's a permission to say that, like, this ordinary person in my life or this extraordinary person in this book is giving me permission to also do the same.
Yeah, and of course we know that heroism as writers is one word at a time, one sentence at a time. It's like a muscle that you
Right.
build. And so, A'Lelia, why is writing heroic for you, and who are your literary heroes?
Well, saying anything out loud that's truth right now feels like courage and heroism, at the moment. And our stories have been buried for so long. When I was starting to write about Madam Walker, there were really very few books that I could turn to. And so I took a lot of courage. When I was reading your book, Glory, I was thinking the books that gave you courage. And then I thought about the people who inspired me. And so it was Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot's Balm in Gilead.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Alfreda Duster
Yeah,
editing
yeah.
her mother's memoir, Ida B. Wells's Crusade for Justice. Gail Lumet Buckley, who wrote about her family, the Horns. But there were not a lot of people doing that. But they sort of gave me a roadmap to say somebody cares about these stories. And my advisor at Columbia, Phyllis Garland, who was the only black woman on the
Yes, yes.
faculty
I worked
at
with her, too.
Columbia, right,
Yeah.
in the fall of 1975. When I mentioned to her what I was going to write my master's paper on, they were these really cliched topics. And she kind of looked at me, and as a professor would do. And at the end of the conversation, she said, "Your name is A'Lelia. Do you have any connection to Madam Walker and A'Lelia Walker?" And nobody had said to me this was important. And I said, "Well, that's my family." And she said, "That's what you're going to write about." But it was that person validating it for me. And I think we're in potentially a similar situation where our stories are not considered to be important, but we make the stories important. That's maybe the heroism.
Yeah, I was attending the African American Book Fair in Austin recently, and Paul Coates, editor of Black Classic Press, made a powerful statement about the fact that black people have a long ancestral tradition of preserving our history. We preserved it when we were enslaved. We preserved it during Reconstruction, and so that it's something that we've always done. And so while I am concerned, erasure and marginalization, that is just an impulse that is genetic in us.
It is.
And so we're going to do what we have to do. And I think one of my literary heroes is Alice Walker, because from her I learned that one of the traits of a writer who wants to write to be read 30 years from now is courage. And it was very difficult to be Alice Walker, writing about violence against black women, rape, incest, and receiving the kind of enormous pushback. Everybody from Phil Donahue to other black women scholars. I mean, it was incredible. And yet, what did she do after she wrote The Color Purple? She starts writing about genital mutilation.
Right, exactly.
Okay? So she really stands out for me, she really does.
So, when I have thought a lot lately about Ashley Sack. So people know the story of Ashley Sack when a child was being sold away during slavery.
Oh, yeah.
And she put a braid and some pecans and a dress into a sack. And that sack survived for many generations. And then a later generation embroidered a message on the sack.
Oh, what she carried?
All that she carried.
all that she carried.
Taya Miles.
All that she carried.
So I just think if Ashley Sack can survive for generations, then our stories that we've written down are going to survive.
Definitely. In your first book, A'Lelia, you were writing about a woman who is clearly mythic in her impact and achievements. How did that affect her daughter? Because she was mythic when she was alive.
When she was alive. Well, when I was writing On Her Own Ground, I realized that I was writing about the relationship between mother and daughter. And I thought I was writing a double biography, but I realized that A'Lelia Walker needed her own book because in real life, she so overshadowed A'Lelia, and it was very hard to be the daughter of this larger-than-life person. But I knew that she had her own path, and her own path was a valid path that I wanted other people to understand. I wanted them to see the beauty of who she was.
And, you know, you worked on both of these books
For 1,000 years. Yes. Marita interviewed me, I think, in 2000. That book will be out next year, won't it? We were at Sankofa Books. I remember this.
Yes, yes. And then
She had faith in me.
and then there was a time you did a presentation in my basement, remember?
Yes.
And we were early awaiting
Yes,
the
eaggerly awaiting the book. Yes, it's finally done.
So wait, was it 10 years or really 1,000?
Oh, yes, a long time. Okay. Too many years to count.
What were the surprises for you in writing about A'Lelia?
Just that she did so much with intention, because she'd been portrayed as, there was one famous historian said that she spent the 1920s playing bridge. Now, I guess that was meant to be a put down, but bridge is really a hard game. So she wasn't stupid, and she liked a good game of poker and all of that. But she was very intentional when she put these parties together. When she had an event, everything had to be just right. The music was always live. It was the best of everything. She traveled to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and when she had then expanded her circle of friends to be international at a time when that was really unusual. So her parties were uptown people, downtown people, white, black, international, queer, straight. She wanted everybody to be comfortable, and that now we take this for granted. Yeah. But in the 1920s, that was really unusual.
Yeah. Glory, talk about how the books that you read inspired your literary activism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, since we're in the library, I have to call out June Jordan, because that was the person that really gave me an understanding of how my literary self could merge with my political and build my ideology. It was one thing reading about it on Howard's campus and understanding it in my mind, but I don't think I knew how to activate it until I started reading June Jordan and Toni Cade Bambara, and then seeing it, seeing other students being okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're gonna protest at the A building. Are there any Howard? Okay, you understand A building, you get it. So it's just you actually putting something into practice. Sometimes when you're reading something, it feels very visceral and it feels like it captures your heart. So how can you take that into real practice? And I feel every time I read something, I'm okay, that was wonderful in my mind. But now what does it mean to do it in my body? What does it mean to actually gather? And even the physical act of writing this book and the first anthology, which you are in as well.
And I was asked a question on Jeopardy.
Yes. Fun trivia fact.
Marita Golden is talking about what writer in her essay, Zora and Me. And the clock went on, and I thought, oh my God, nobody's gonna, finally, just before it went, I got it.
So, it was just this moment of how do I take this community that I built online that was modeled off of all the things that I read and the experiences I had at Howard, how do I bring it into the real world? And it was simple. It's write a book, ask the question. And the prominent question in the Well-Read Black Girl anthology is when did you see yourself in literature? And as a Black woman, that is such a powerful question, because it crystallizes your writing life, the words that made you see I could be a writer, and I give myself permission to do this, but also that visibility. We were just in the next room and seeing the photos of Nella Larson and seeing all of the Madden C.J. Walker. It's real. Their lives are such a testimony of all the things that we can do. And so I really was intentional about gathering and making sure we had the book, but also the festival and other places where there were offshoots of the community, not necessarily guided by me, but you can do it too. If you want to have a Well-Read Black Girl community in Arizona or in South Carolina, you don't need my permission to do that. I'm just modeling this. And what I like to think about it is just like models of possibility, of just like, okay, like this is just a framework that you can turn into your community and make it your own and create your own spaces, and just use the books as tools of connecting and use it as ways of us just like figuring it all out. Like it's all of this is really connected with my curiosity of what I read, what inspires me, and the people that come before us, our ancestors.
I know you want to talk a little bit about Baldwin.
Yes, Baldwin too. There's so many people. I'm gonna actually read something again. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is from the archive. I believe I actually got it here at LOC. Don't quote me on that, but this is, I have to look at my citation, but it says, June Jordan wrote, "It seems obvious the best way to bring people into the library is to bring them in as writers, as thinkers, as readers. I think of the library as a sanctuary from the spectacle, from the alienation, from the unnamed, and the seemingly unnameable. A library is where you keep records of involvement, the glorious and ugly tangling of the human spirit with what we meet, what we see. A library is where you keep records of human experience, humanly defined. That means humanly evaluated and means life worded into ideas living people can use. People belong in such a sanctuary. Bring them in. Bring the children into the library as writers, and they will think, and they will learn to lead, and they will learn to read proudly." So, like, I found this on a transcript, had my gloves on in the archive, and I just was like, this is it. Like, the library is the space where we gather, we get the information, and then we go think, and we become proud of all the knowledge that we've attained.
Yeah, I think the library is where we become human beings.
Yes, it's true. You can do that on the internet.
Yeah, because all those voices, all that history, the energy of it is around you and coming into you, and it's just amazing.
It forces you to formulate a real clear opinion and like to have a perspective on life. And what I really enjoy about Joy Goddess and the work that you're doing, it's just like you see her perspective so clearly and so proudly, whether she's playing bridge or not. Like she was living a life, and she was doing it without needing validation from other people.
Right.
And that's an amazing thing. We might, seem like, oh, that seems easy, but I don't think so. I think it's really
because
hard.
there's a lot of ups and downs in the story.
Yeah.
So can I say something about libraries?
Please,
Yes.
please. And one thing about libraries is also the quiet. Mm-hmm. Used to be. Now, the library today is not the library of my childhood,
Right.
but the silence and the quiet, which is an affirmation of your individual spirit. Mm-hmm. And that's why you go to the library. I would put on my skates. We lived on Harvard Street, the same street that Jean Toomer was raised on. Wow. And I would put on my skates after school and skate over to the Mount Pleasant Library. And they had, all these about 20 steps, marble steps up to the door. And it was always a very special going up those steps. And then you'd open the door, and it was just quiet. And the quiet was really an invitation. Mm-hmm. It really was. So, you spent a lot of time in libraries. You spent 1,000 years in libraries.
Right, 1,000 years.
Yeah.
But I was going to, for me, as a kid, mm-hmm. the library was important. So when I grew up in the suburbs of Indianapolis, in a black suburb of Indianapolis, and we didn't have a public library that was a city library, but our school library was open during the summer. And I spent a lot of time in the library during the school year, and I was really attracted to a biography series. So I read almost every book in the biography series. It was the Bobbs Merrill biography series, but there were 183 books in that series, and there were there were 3 black women who were in that series, but they were not in my library in my predominantly white school. Uh-huh. And there were 3 black men, Booker T. Washington and a couple of other people, but I never read those books. I read about Susan Blackwell and Amelia Earhart and mm-hmm. Newt Rockne, who was the coach at Notre Dame, yes. Even though I am not a football. But I read those, but I was fascinated by those stories, but I didn't see myself in those books. And I brought this book to Bright April, which Carla Hayden has said was the first book she read with a black character. And the reason I brought it is Carla Hayden and I are born in the same year. And in the summers, I would spend some summers with my great aunt in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where my mother had grown up. And she took me to the colored library in the late 50s, and the librarian gave me this book. It was the first, like Carla Hayden, the first time I ever read a book with a black girl as the main character.
Yeah, and you know, you and I are of a different generation than this little
Yes, than
here
Gloria.
or here, and so
Carrying on, darling.
Yes, and so that you know, we grew up in the 50s and 60s not having a lot of black characters, and so I got black history from my father, so that when a teacher would say the slaves were happy, I could raise my hand and say, my father told me they weren't happy and they wanted to be free.
Yes.
But I learned that from my father, not from the books. But there were books, J.A. Rogers, there was a whole generation of black scholars, many of them self-trained,
Right.
who were, you know, codifying our history. And you talked about the anthology, Black Voices, and how that impacted you.
Yeah, so in high school, it's 1968, Martin Luther King is assassinated. I had just been elected as vice president of student council on the same day. There was some backlash to that. And I, with a few other friends, white and black friends, persuaded the administration to let us have a black humanities class. And so for that class, we were reading books, but I discovered Black Voices was an anthology. Mari Evans lived in Indianapolis, and Gwendolyn Brooks I'm born on the same day as Gwendolyn Brooks. So they were kind of my literary heroes, but Black Voices was my first really deep dive into black authors.
Right, definitely. And so that you grew up
Yes.
taking all of this, you know, for granted.
And so, absolutely. I don't think I took it for granted, but I just didn't understand the power that it was just more accessible to me. But the anthology that changed my perspective was The Black Woman, also edited by Mari Evans.
Yeah.
And so that
Was it Mari or Tony?
No, Tony.
It was Tony.
Child.
Yes.
Tony
Tony K. Bambara.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So what is the what is the anthology Mari Evans did? She did one too.
No, I don't think so.
But she's
Somebody-
in that.
But she's in it.
She's in them.
She's in it.
Somebody Google Mari Evans.
Don't Google Mari.
But yes, The Black Woman for sure. Tony
Yeah,
K.
because it
Bambara.
has that wonderful picture of the woman with the
Right.
afro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything with a picture of an woman with an afro in 1970, I was on our wall.
Yes, yes.
But so I took the same cues of, seeing black women be, again, just so, the audacity,
Yeah, right.
like being able to write about all these subjects, reading The Color Purple for the first time, seeing the film for the first
Right.
time, just like going through it. Like I felt like I had this trove of things just to go through that I will say a lot of times I didn't understand. So I did so much rereading. I didn't have a space to talk to anyone about it necessarily,
right.
So it was things that I was trying to like figure out, reading Maya Angelou for the first time, like reading it really young too, like 11, 12 years old, not really understanding the complexity of the issues being addressed, but knowing that I recognized her face on the back cover. And that was enough to say, like, okay, I should keep going. And I did appreciate the rigor of it. I wouldn't have called it that at 12, but like knowing that I didn't understand it, but I wanted to be grown and try to understand it.
Yeah. Right.
Like, so I feel like that's also like a rite of passage of like, okay, like I get this now. I've read Beloved 12 times and I get it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I asked an earlier question about, the act of writing being heroic, and I think we're all writing to capture history for our audience. When I was writing Migration to the Heart, I had this one reader in mind, this is a book for, a young black girl who came of age in the 60s, blah, blah, blah. And then because of the way it was written and what it was about, it became a book for everybody and anybody. And so we are consciously writing to the future.
Well, I mean, and whenever you talk to young people, somebody emails me or they're doing a National History Day report, I'm really trying to feed into that young girl what I needed when I was that age. That I want somebody, you know, I want to make sure that there's not another generation that doesn't know the stories, that doesn't feel proud. I mean, one of my very first, those of you who know National History Day in, I don't know, 1980 or so, a young girl wrote to me a letter, because it was before the internet, from Oklahoma, and she wanted to write about Madam Walker, and she said, my teacher doesn't believe this person exists. So you know, I went, you know, I photocopied everything, and she made it to the Nationals at College Park. But it's that's why I write.
Now, during the 1,000 years that you were researching these two books, the process of researching
I own it.
changed a lot. And talk about that.
Oh God, yeah. So you know, when I was actually, we just had the delight of being able to see original documents from the manuscript collection. So there was a letter, a 1910 letter that Madam Walker had written to Booker T. Washington. And I had gone through the manuscript collection, probably with facsimiles and some of the folders. But at that point, when I first started, it really was, you go to the library, you look at the original documents, you scroll through microfilm. I spent a lot of time in that building across the street putting quarters into machines, photocopying things. So times have changed. I interviewed some of the survivors. People were still living in the early 80s when I started doing this. But now things are digitized. You can be in the middle, you know, wake up early in the morning or in the middle of the night, go to ProQuest and newspapers.com and Library of Congress website.
But it's a very dramatic thing doing research the old-fashioned way. Because when I was researching Long Distance Life about blacks, you know, this family that had migrated from the South and 60 years in their life, I very fondly remember hours spent in the Library of Congress, you know, in the little, I forget the name of the room, eagerly, you know, going through the books to find out which article I needed, and then quietly waiting for the books to come on.
That's true.
And it was just such a beautiful ritual. And actually, I got so entranced with the research, I had to slap myself and say, stop, you have to write at some point.
No, there is a point where you just go down those rabbit holes, and they end up in the first version of your manuscript, and then they still end up having to be excised.
What notable needs a biography? What black notable that if you were going to write a biography about, you know, you've done the Walker clan, like for example, when the biography of Ida B. Wells was published, I said, this is the first time? This is the first one? And then when Alexis DeVoe did her biography, was it of Audre Lorde? But
right.
Yeah, I said, this is the first, you know? So what notable would you?
Well, you know, these are, because I'm in the Harlem Renaissance, so the obscure people. Georgette Harvey. Georgette Harvey was the first Maria in Porgy and Bess. She traveled internationally. She was in Russia when World War I started. She had to escape to Japan. Then she came back and she led her own group. But she's somebody who I would love to, if I were writing another book, but I'm not. No, I told Rebecca earlier, I was in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, and I went to a museum, La Musée de Free People of Color. And my grandfather, who was my historian, has saved lots and lots of documents, and among the things he has are free papers for his great-grandmother, whose name was Adeline Rochester. She was a 23-year-old hairdresser in 1861, and he had her free papers from New Orleans. So I'm interested, I'm not going to write a book about her, but I'm interested in following her life and her journey for the rest of her life.
Now, Gloria, you have this, and then I'll open it up to questions, but Gloria, you have this incredible empire, this vast community of writers who are readers, they attend conferences, and you've made the idea of book reading so intimate and so personal. What are a couple of the books that you have found your community really, really loved?
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, I feel like we have to go through like different genres. Like with when it comes to the classics, I think you can never go wrong revisiting anything by Octavia Butler, especially in this time period when we're reflecting and thinking about the future, but how we have to research the past to know the future. So Octavia Butler is something that we always reread. When it comes to the nature of loving the self and thinking of self-compassion as this radical act, revisiting Bell Hooks. If there's any time we're hosting a book club and we utter the word Bell Hooks, it's like hundreds of people are in the Zoom. They're like all gathering because her work in terms of that, again, that self-love is so, it's so relevant, still makes sense, So those two books I feel like we've constantly revisited. Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, it's like the classics. But then in terms of this new wave of incredible writers, one of the first writers that we introduced into the book club is Angela Flournoy, and she wrote the book The Turner House, and she actually is 10 years in. Her second book is about to come out in September, and it's called The Wilderness, and I feel like so excited. I feel like we have like watched her evolve and mature as a writer, and I'm reading The Galley now, and it's like the brilliance is still there, it's still as sharp. So we tend to gather around the newbies, like the debut writers, and watching them write their first book, and then their second, and then their third, and we're just like cheering them along as they build their career, and we know that they're going to be the next, dare I say, Tony's, Maya's, Alice, like they're going to be the new ones that are like writing work that pushes the edges and allows us to think about what the future could look like, and other young girls will look to their work. So there's just so many, and then the girls love romance. So if there's a romance book by like Tia Williams or, Kedney Ryan, like everyone is flocking to it because it's another level of escapism. It depends on where we're trying to enter the book. Like if we're trying to be grounded and learn more about ourselves and our history, or if we want to escape and, have a little fun and just like, I think it's part of the Joy Goddess effect, like we want to enter these books and enjoy our lives and be present, but also learn about ourselves. It just depends on what we're trying to explore at the time.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not mention that on October 17th this year, the Hurston Wright Foundation celebrates 35 years.
Yes.
And at the ceremony, which will be held here in Washington, D.C., you talked about debut writers, we're actually unveiling a very new, exciting award for debut writers. So for those of you who want to attend the Black Literary Oscars,
Yes, they are.
visit hurstonwright.org to get on our mailing list. Let's take a question or two from the audience. This lady over here.
Hi, Miss Bundles. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Kaya?
So I was wondering what book the librarian gave you. What's the title of the book your librarian gave you?
Oh, that I picked?
Yes.
So it's called Bright April by Marguerite DeAngeli. And at the Pine Bluff Colored Library is where I got this book.
Nice. Thank you.
Did she do other books?
I don't know.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, yeah.
And it's written in the 1940s.
Okay. Beautiful. Any other questions? Yes, here.
Research about Walker, what did you find? When you were doing the research, was there anything that surprised you? Like, what shocked you, what you learned? I mean, I think we hear so much about Madam C.J. Walker, but we hear so little about her daughter. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that walked away that made you think, wow, why is this not more prevalent?
Yeah, well, everything. But here's what I'll say about the Harlem Renaissance. We're in this centennial. Though every year from 1919 to 1931 could be a centennial of the Harlem Renaissance, but this is the centennial of the publication of the New Negro. And I think in this moment, we are seeing a light shone on the women of the Harlem Renaissance. And their stories really have not been told, that they have really been, there's a new historical fiction book that Victoria Christopher Murray wrote, Harlem Rhapsody, about Jessie Fawcett and W.E.B. Du Bois. And it is fiction, but it does highlight Jessie, and Jessie Fawcett is somebody who really needs a really serious
Okay, definitely.
biography.
Yeah.
Can I
yeah.
give a shout out for that too? So they're republishing There Is Confusion, and I wrote the introduction for that for the modern library, and in just like doing the research for that and like going through her papers and rethinking what her perspective was just so illuminating. Like it is. There just is so much we can constantly revisit from the writers of that time period. So it's just like you said, every 10 years we should go back to it.
Right, and I think that, it takes, there are many men who've written wonderful books about some of these women, but it really does take a woman writer to research this and really look at it from a woman's perspective. And what I've tried to do in Joy Goddess is not just A'Lelia Walker's life, but the life of the friends in her circle and what else was going on in Harlem. So I'm really trying to tell a wider story, a more multidimensional story of the Harlem Renaissance.
Any other questions? Yes, back here.
Hello. I just want to say thank you to you all for just, doing the work that you do in the world. The question I had, if you had just like the free agency to just like write about someone dead or alive that you would like to write and just reimagine what their life story would be like, who would it be?
You're the biographer.
Well, I told you, Adeline Rochester, my great-great-great-grandmother, who moved after she was a free woman of color in 1861 in New Orleans, moved to Memphis in 1864 and married my great-grandfather, who became a state legislature during Reconstruction in Arkansas. And then when the backlash to Reconstruction happened, moved his family to Oberlin and sent his children to school. So those are the people I want to write about.
I would probably write about Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yeah.
I think there is a biography, but you can't have too many,
Right.
of a woman who was as extraordinary as Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yeah. I would probably say Toni Cade Bambara. Thinking about her activism and her writing and the way it was so unconventional and so powerful, and it included so many people on the ground, and thinking of that like literary activism in practice.
Okay, no more questions? You
Lots
had
more questions.
Okay.
Hi, first of all, thank you all for being here and sharing with us. If you could give one word of advice to young writers or aspiring writers, what would it be?
Right. I teach writing and at the University of Marita Golden.
Yes.
And people will often talk a lot about what they're going to write. They have so many ideas, but they don't write. And I understand that there is a process where books can gestate. Okay, I know that an idea may take time. I mean, for example, you have the example of Edward P. Jones, who basically wrote The Known World in his head for 10 years.
Yeah.
But before he wrote The Known World, he had actually written several other books.
Yeah.
So I think that you have to write, and the other thing is find community. I think it's really important for writers to take classes and create a support group, find a support group. There's so much you can learn from other writers, but you do have to write in a diary for 10 minutes a day. Write.
Yeah, I everything she said. And in addition to that, like following your curiosities, the things that I looked back, especially when I was writing this memoir, I had as a kid, I had a fascination with doing like a lot of scrapbooking and doing zines, and I had so many journals to reference from, and I used to write in the margins. And though at the time that felt like silly and almost like it didn't seem significant in any way.
Pathological.
Yeah, that too.
But writing is a form of insanity.
Exactly.
There's no question about that.
But when I was going back, when I started to as I got older and looked at the patterns of my life, because writing especially if you want to write a memoir about your life, it is like this kind of self-reflection and this self-investigation where you have to go back in time and look back and be objective. Like, who was I at 13? What does this note in the margin mean? Just like follow those things and just do it for yourself. Like, it's not for anyone else. That the silly things that, like, follow that wholeheartedly and be so true to it. So you're just like always being yourself, like what yourself looks like on the page because you did that in the 3rd grade and you did that in high school and in college. Like, it just keeps repeating those patterns of like knowing who you are keeps coming up, and just trust that.
So, Gloria, I would say that your book is kind of a roadmap, as is your new book on how to be a Black writer. Read a lot. I mean, this is the obvious thing, but you've taught yourself to be a writer by reading other really excellent writers.
And I have a friend from high school who came here, which I was so excited to see. And she was like, it seems just like you. And it like touched me so much because I haven't seen her in years. Hey, Nakia. And I was just like, I felt like I want to cry. But it's so true that like who I wrote in this book is really me. And I'm so glad that someone from my past life like recognizes that and appreciates it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we get anointed, baptized by parents and the people who make us writers.
Yes.
So that while my father was telling me these stories and taking me out in his taxi cab and raising me like I was a boy, my mother was telling me, you are going to write a book one day. Oh my God, how extraordinary.
Wow.
So we are anointed by circumstance, anointed by people to do this work.
Yeah, you're the storyteller. I had one of my mother's friends read a short story that I wrote when I was 8 and sent it to a children's magazine. So I had a byline at 8. So I thought I was a writer. I could not carry a tune, so I was not going to be the singer,
Right.
but I thought of myself as a writer.
Exactly, because you were anointed as a writer by that adult.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so. My son is now 5, and he's very talkative, like his mother, and he has already earned the nickname Professor. So so we call him Professor, and it's just like he's hearing that, and and just like that repeating of Professor, of Scholar, and I just hope that holds him into adulthood, and he just owns that.
Yes. Time for one. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much.
Oh,
I know I'm behind the podium. If you can just hear my voice, that would be great. I'm hopeful that maybe we could create like a database of people that would be significant to write about, and then people could research them and see if we could come up. But there's a long list. Speaking of the Harlem Renaissance, I thought of Wallace Thurman. I thought of the Grimke, Angelina Grimke. I thought of all these people that are not as well known, but like weave together the rest of the Renaissance to bring up the more popularly known authors. So.
I think one place to get a good start on that is the Dictionary of African American Biography, and that Skip Gates and Evelyn Higginbotham did. And then there is a sub set of that, the Harlem Renaissance biographies, and they're Wikipedia length pieces, but it lists all of the people. There are also a couple of Harlem Renaissance encyclopedias that will list all the people, even though there aren't full-blown biographies of them.
and you. Oh, she's giving you the microphone so we can hear you.
A canon of African American female writers.
Say that again, because
Creating a canon of African American female writers. There's lots of lists out there, and as a librarian, I think I have everyone there is. But there are certain books that African American women, in my opinion, should read, just as to kind of lay that foundation for the next generations as well that have come. Because African American women's writing has changed throughout the centuries and the decades. And so just, you don't have to, come up with one now, but just thinking of what that would look like and who would be included.
well, I think whoever put that together, you'd have to have a very diverse group of women who would create it, representing different generations and experiences and genders and everything, and it could be quite exciting.
So if the Library of Congress wants to hire us to create the, we're available.
I actually just ordered a book that came out in the 80s called, it's the Norton Anthology of African American, and so you know that. And I just started it. It's like this thick. I don't know, I may never finish it. But it would be interesting to see which Black women writers are in that.
Is that the one that skipped in? Yeah.
Yeah.
It would, and so if you did that today,
It would be, right.
very different. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Clay Smith. I'm the literary director. I just wanted to say thank you for being here. To the question about the database of Black writers, I'm biased because I work here, but the Library of Congress is an actually excellent place to sort of create your own database. And there's this really great service called Ask a Librarian, where you can email us and start your research there if you don't even know really how to start the research. And lastly, I just wanted to say that one of the ways that we can support our writers is by going to the book signing line, showing publishers that these writers are viable and have something to say. So the signing is going to start just right here at the back of the room. We're doing these great events every Thursday, so we hope you join us again. And lastly, thank you so much to Marita for moderating and to Gloria and Alelia for being here. And this was a very thoughtful conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.